So, moving on, we're going to go to the meat of today's stream, and that is really kind of just going over NASA, SpaceX, and the connection to UAP. So, let me go ahead and bring up some information on that here. All right, so good old NASA. Never a straight answer, right? That's what most people say. Never a straight answer. Then you have SpaceX, who has taken on the reins to take us further out into space, potentially Mars. They're talking the moon, obviously, with the Artemis rocket uh, gonna go there. So, there's also things that they haven't told us. There's things behind the scenes where you have had astronauts who have gone into space and said that they've seen things only to come back and get debriefed. And then obviously NASA tells them that they can't speak about it at that point. So, tough situation, you know what I mean? But I have a few examples because a lot of the people that are into ufology and who watch ufology type podcasts already have a deep knowledge of the events that have gone on or the history of ufology. However, we have new people, young people, and just truthfully people who never really embraced the subject, who never thought to think that UAP were real, are now coming in to find out the history. So I think it'd be good to kind of go over some of those things. And one of the first things that I had here is astronaut John Glenn here, World War II hero known for performing. At 11:03, Glenn steps onto a rocket, and actually, when it went into orbit, he saw what he described as fireflies outside the window. Now, I looked at this. This ended up being debunked as ice particles. But what you're going to find out is for every incident that happens, there is going to be some sort of explanation that they give to try to debunk the situation. So, but just the history. This is 1962, so we're talking 7 years prior to Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, or actually, yeah, I guess Buzz also stepped on the moon. Our first people to step on the moon. This would have been one of the Gemini flights. So we have his incident where he sees these fireflies that were actually end up being debunked as ice crystals. Then we go on to June 3rd, 1965. You had Gemini 4, and you had astronauts Ed White and James McDivitt. So they go up. McDivitt sees an object outside the craft. There is a voice recording of this conversation. And according to what was said, McDivitt says that he had observed some sort of object flying past the window that seemed to have mechanical arms sticking out. Okay. So they're in space for a few days. I guess June 7th, they end up coming back 4 days after they launched. And McDivitt says the object wasn't shown on any of the images. No one knows for sure what it was. Could it have been ET? Then you have Gemini 7, December 4th, 1965. You have Frank Norman, Jim Lovell, of course, from the other Fateful Apollo mission. And they notice, and I heard this on the voice recording. Obviously, I won't play it. We've been getting copyright strikes lately. They had a voice recording talking about a sighting. He calls it a bogey. Some say it was a booster from the rocket and other debris. However, Lovell actually stated that he could still see the booster, so this has to be something else. So what do you think it was? I mean, obviously it had to be some sort of unidentified object. If you have the astronaut going up, he knows what the booster looks like, obviously, and he just reported this to NASA, and NASA obviously did what they do best, went ahead and covered that up. We never found out about it. This happened to come out. You go forward, we have Gemini 11. So you had Pete Conrad, Richard Jordan, astronauts. They attempted to dock with the spacecraft. They ended up docking. And when they did, they saw this bright shape, this shape shifting object. They were able to take pictures as it passed the window. Some say it was a Russian satellite. However, the Russian satellite, in fact, was actually thousands of miles away at the time. So there was no way that it could possibly be it. But go ahead, take a look. This is the object they took a picture of. This is supposed to have been the shape shifting object. And, this is just what, 3 or 4 astronaut flights into our space program. And each time they go, essentially, they're seeing these things in the skies or in space. So, jumping from there, we have one of the more famous flights, Apollo 11. So you had Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin. Now, after successfully launching into orbit with the world watching, after 3 days into the trip, they see a flashing object. Neil Armstrong radios mission control. He asks if it's part of the Saturn V rocket. Really not wanting to kind of discuss this on live TV, to didn't want to freak out the people. He asks if it's Saturn V rocket. They don't say anything about it at the time while they're live. And then reportedly, Aldrin, which I'll show you here in a minute, actually ended up admitting to seeing extraterrestrial during the trip. So here's Buzz Aldrin saying this. Now, they did go... Well, he ended up, I guess, taking back what he said, or saying that it was taken out of context, that the show that he appeared on when he made this statement, they edited it into a way where it appeared like he was on.
60 seconds.
I saw this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically, it becomes an unidentified flying object.
Okay, so that was him talking about seeing a UFO in space. Now, he ended up going back and, I guess, stating that this never happened, or his statement was taken out of context. I'm sorry. I don't know. I mean, I think that if you look at that clip, I mean, he clearly says what he says. I know that I've been in situations where I've been on or a part of shows that have edited things out, and they can make things seem a certain way. But the story was, after this, he ended up taking a lie detector test and passing, saying that what he said was true. So what they do is they put enough information out there, enough opposing information out there to cloud up the whole thing. So now he's dead and gone at this point. We can't ask him or probe him for this information. And now we're just left with a video confession stating that he saw UFOs, and then a report stating that no, he said that this was taken out of context. So once again, a cloudy situation that NASA is involved in. Let's go ahead and move on. And then, mind you, during this whole time, we had the whole active UFO program starting from Roswell. At this point, it's 1969 when they take the flight to the moon. So it's a good 7 years in between the first astronaut going up into space and then the first one landing foot on the moon. And with the UFO report, Project Blue Book, the Condon report came out in 1968, basically stating there's nothing to see here, which is a year before they went to the moon. So you just kind of start to see how the situation is sticky, and how from the beginning there's been some sort of like a convoluted, like a cover-up almost, I'd say. So taking a look at this, just moving on, we have astronaut Edgar Mitchell. I'm sure everyone will people familiar with ufology know exactly who Edgar Mitchell is. And let me see what we have for him. This is Edgar Mitchell, if I can bring him in. Yep, this is astronaut Edgar Mitchell. I have some clips where he actually was talking. Let me see if I can find that here. It's the STS. Okay. No, that's not it. All right, let me go back. Okay, well, let me just read this off here because Edgar Mitchell, few notes about the gentleman. He's best known for typing in 80 lines of code to save the entire Apollo 14 mission, which he was a part of, that descended to the moon in 1971. He also claimed the top military officials had hidden evidence of UFOs, potentially alien spacecraft, and that they were particularly fond of hovering over White Sands testing range in New Mexico. So this is a quote from Edgar Mitchell here. He says, from looking at Earth from space, you come up with the question, who are we? How did we get here? Where's all this going? And that's an ancient question that humans have asked for a long time. He says, my experience was to realize that perhaps our science is wrong at answering these questions, and perhaps our religious cosmologies are archaic and flawed. And given that now we are an extraterrestrial civilization ourselves, we need to re-ask these questions and do a lot more work to find the answers. And this is a quote from Edgar Mitchell. So I don't believe he actually ever stated that he saw anything in space, but more so that he is just had a belief that extraterrestrials existed. So moving on, we have September 1973. So there was a Skylab where the astronauts were actually hanging out in anti-gravity and doing all sorts of tests and experiments in orbit, and they ended up seeing a bright red light. And I actually have a picture of that here, which is going to be here. So I guess these are the actual pictures that they took 1973 from a Skylab, and they saw these red lights shape-shifting from the shape you see on the left to the shape you see on the right, or vice versa. So next we have STS-48 Space Shuttle mission, September 15th, 1991. So orbiting the Earth somewhere in Australia, and we'll go ahead, I'm gonna get a video for it coming up here. The STS-48 shuttle mission orbiting Earth somewhere over Australia. They see an object flash and then change directions. I love this video here too. You'll see in a minute. Now, what in space could change directions like that? Let me run that, and then you'll see what we're talking about here. So this will be the video, STS-48. So this is September 15, 1991. See the UAP moving to the left. Watch it abruptly change direction, and then the projectile comes out. This is a famous video that I'm sure a lot of people have seen if you know anything about ufology. So the question is, what is the UAP? Okay, this is how I would position it, me looking at this. So what is the object that shoot towards it? Is it just a coincidence that something comes in frame near the object as it moves away? Was it anti-UFO weapons fired from the ground, possibly? Would that show that we actually have attempted to shoot down anomalous craft? They try to write it off as ice and then being blown off in the other direction by some from the gases from the shuttle. But it's a coincidence to me. It's too coincidental that you have a projectile, what looks to be a projectile. It looks like it's simply getting out the way. I mean, I don't know how else to put that. And it's exhibiting technically one of the 5 observables. So if we go by that rule, then that makes this anomalous on its own. So moving on, we have February 25th, 1996, the Columbia shuttle mission STS-75 incident, where you probably recall this as well, where astronauts lost control of basically a 13-mile length tether. And I think we can take a look at what that looked like from their video. Apparently, they lost control of it. They drifted off into space. They continued to film it. And as they did that, these things, as you see in the frame here, ended up showing up. And once again, this looks pretty crazy, looks pretty creepy. If those would be UAP, then it's pretty amazing how, with the amount that there are, and why they'd be focused on this object. However, this would be something that debunkers across the board would look at and just explain off as small a trick of the camera, basically, with small item or small things in the frame actually closer to the camera. That tether you're looking at is 13 miles long, so it's way out there at this point. And if you were to assume that these things were where that, where the tether is, you could assume that they'd be huge. But they're trying to say that they're, close to the camera, debris. I mean, and the thing is like, how can you even argue that? Because we unfortunately don't have a way of getting up there to test that out with our own cameras. So once again, another incident caught on camera in space related to NASA that gets explained away. There hasn't been one, I don't think, yet that we've gone across here that has not been explained away by NASA. But let's go ahead and move on. We do have shuttle flight STS-80. So STS-80, the video captures objects that seem to just appear coming up from the clouds. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So these images, these objects were actually just popping up on film. This is a shuttle orbiting the Earth at the time. I said they appear to be coming up from the clouds and kind of just appearing. They're blinking. What do you think? I mean, it's kind of crazy. If I were to look at this, I don't know if I go with their explanation. The explanation that they gave for this is small tumbling objects reflecting sunlight. Now, I know objects do tumble in space, and depending on what side is showing, is going to reflect more light. So that makes sense. But you can't make that the answer every time. And I kind of think that they get, just like with the government explaining away UFOs is swamp gas or weather balloons. Like, you have your set things to go to, your set list of answers and responses to go to. And I think that was the same thing with NASA. I mean, if you look at all the cases and then the explanations, you can see it, they're playing out of the same playbook. So moving on, we have STS-115. So that was September 2006. They had the camera focused on the booster of the shuttle once it had disconnected, was falling back to Earth. The camera was focused on that booster, and then ended up catching a weird image in the frame. So let's take a look at that and see what they saw. So that's the booster falling back to Earth. I guess this is what they caught in the frame. Weird. The explanation for this one was actually something being shining on the glass from the inside of the shuttle. That could be it. That could be what we're looking at here. It's possible. but it could not be. It could be UAP. So, I don't know. That one's in the air with me. I could go either way on that. I could see how that could be. I don't know though, but when the clouds show up there, it kind of looks like. Look again. Does it look like it's on top of the clouds or below the clouds? I don't know. Let me see. Yeah, that could go either way. I mean, if it's below the clouds, obviously it can't be reflection from the window, but then it kind of looks like it could be on top. So I guess I could go with that explanation. But the whole point is that, yeah, maybe this was that this time, but then all the other times that we've had incidents out there in space or astronauts that have described things, they've been written off as other things. Now, jumping into something else, this is more rumored than anything, and I actually, I don't know how much I buy into this, but let me get the NASA stuff back up here. I don't know how much I buy into this one, but we're going to jump into, do you think that there is, and I actually give this to the viewer, our new subscriber, Angela G from New Zealand. She actually asked the question to me of, do you believe that there's a secret space program? And I kind of lean with, yeah, I really think that there potentially could be a secret space program, only because even with the launching of top secret satellites and just the secret things that the government does just for protection of the country, would you think that they would tell you every time they launched? I mean, we have situations where current day, you have people taking videos of things that they think are UAP in the sky that get explained off as, oh, well, we just did a missile test at such and such airfield or the military base. And I'm in Bakersfield, California, so I'm not too far from Vandenberg, not too far from Edwards. So, there's a lot of things shot up from Vandenberg, and we often see those things. But are they missiles every time? I mean, or are they sometimes secret payloads that they might be sending off? Is it possible that they are manned missions going out into space? I don't know. I mean, it's something that you have to ask yourself. You have to think about what the ulterior motive is for them not standing behind their astronauts and the numerous sightings that they have. I mean, it's obvious they're there. We had Roswell in 1947. We had 15, 20 years of UFO sightings before we even sent the first person into space. So if we're seeing them in the sky, we know they're coming in from space. It's obvious they're in space. I mean, you don't really have to think too hard to believe that. But yeah, going into this rumored secret space mission, it was rumored to be an Apollo 20 launch that was supposedly part of a secret launch to go after what was said to be an ET aircraft or ET craft that was on the moon, was later determined to be a hoax. However, is it possible that some of these launches that we see, like I stated before, are actually part of the secret space program? Is it possible that they, if there were such a thing, if there was a base, not saying that there isn't, we don't know, maybe there is, and maybe that is what they're doing. But is it thinkable to think that they would want to take those missions silently, like off the radar? They wouldn't want anyone to know that they were going to do so. And then that kind of leads me into, if you remember, the Israeli prime minister, the one who retired, who said that we had an alliance with the Galactic Federation, and we were going to Mars and having these meetings with these ETs. I mean, so when you look at it, I don't know. I mean, that sounds kind of crazy when you think about it, but at the same time, if we're actively going out there, and if NASA, the secret is that they've been in contact and kind of communicating with these ET, or even in conflict, as you saw with the clip we showed with the projectile coming up at the UAP. Even if we're in conflict with these, if we're in some sort of contact, is it so far off to think that what that prime minister and the Israeli prime minister, what he said was plausible or not? I don't know. So these are just questions you have to ask yourself. And now we're in the new era, the new dawn, with SpaceX here, who's taken over for NASA. And I think it was about a year ago, they showed a video where the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, it showed a big thing just kind of fly past the window. It was anomalous, but then they said, oh no, that's just ice. So here we go again. So we have Elon, we have a new space program set up, or a new company running the space program, but then we're going back to the same explanations for anomalous activity in space. And the whole thing about it is we can't prove it, so we'll never be able to ourselves debunk their explanation for what we're seeing. And let's get into the fact that obviously there's been many instances of the International Space Station, the cameras shutting off whenever something anomalous happens. So with Bill Nelson stepping in and everybody feeling real good about, NASA's going to tackle UAPs now. Oh, they're going to look into the history of the thing that they've recorded. They're part of the game. They're part of the whole cover up. They're part of the game. Why would they start playing right now or fair now? As you see, what has Bill Nelson delivered up to this point? He came in, he promised that he would look into these files and he would get us the answers that we needed. And here we are, a year, 2 years later, no new information from NASA. And I think it's part of the whole kicking the can down the road thing, the same thing. So it's obvious the government is in step with NASA on keeping the secret and keeping everything, pinned up behind closed doors. That's why I don't really pay any close attention to what Elon Musk is doing, or SpaceX, or any of these missions out into space, because the truth is they won't tell us everything. We have the Mars rover with cameras, and this is supposed to be open access, so we get to see what it brings in, although we know things get vetted. So do you focus all your time and energy into what they filter to you? That's the question. I think we waste a lot of time doing that, and I think that ends up being the big distraction. I think more of the focus should be us taking all the data that we have, like my sighting, for instance, taking the abductees' experience, taking the cattle mutilations, the farmers' stories, taking all these things, putting these things together so we can all see together that what we really have going on, which is ETs visiting, abducting, mutilating, and then what for is really what we want to know, and what can we do to make sure that we're in the best possible position to keep ourselves protected and safe. At least open that dialogue and have the conversation with us, so we can all together, even with the military and the government, let's all talk and see what it is that we need to do to get through this situation here. But that's me rambling, and let me go ahead and move on. So as far as that goes, so yeah, we got through NASA from the first launch, the first man to win the orbit, 1962. We ended with SpaceX. Oh, no. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to say was Elon Musk, to kind of put the cap on that. there was a story, and I can't seem to find it anymore, where Elon Musk, someone that stated a couple months ago, and I saw the video on it, where they stated he had admitted that there were UAP observed following the SpaceX crafts as they have been launching and been launched. So I couldn't find the actual story to that because I really wanted to, kind of talk about that and look at that. But that'd be great if Elon Musk is actually gonna, being open about, because he's privately owned company. So he's not tied to the government as far as we know. So getting information like that from him is actually pretty good if that is actually a thing. So, this is at this point, we talked about a lot of stuff. And as far as NASA, SpaceX, the secrets, the cover ups, if there's anybody out there that had anything to say about it while we're here, go ahead and chime in. If not, just leave them in the comments. So we'll take a look at it and we'll address it on the next show.